All right. Well,
You're
welcome.
looking good today, Mike, all the way over there in England.
Yeah, well, I've been all over the world today. I've been engaged with the Philippines and China and Australia this morning, and UK and Europe lunchtime, and now Washington, US in the afternoon, so, or my afternoon.
Well,
So,
we're glad to be part of that world global ministry. Thank you.
well, it's good to connect with people, that's for sure. So, excellent. All right. Well, anyone want to start with anything, or test of me, or anything you want to ask or share?
I've missed the last month. I apologize for that.
It's okay.
Had some glitches somewhere along the way, and then I was busy. But it's nice to be back.
Yeah, it's good to see you. So, anything you want to share or ask?
I'm still progressing on my visitations every month.
Yep.
Pretty exciting. And the journey that I began last January is still continuing every month. And I'm journaling and drawing a lot of not only interesting but very wonderful insights out of some of the conversations I'm having with the angels that are coming.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting. Along the way, of course, is some good teaching that I'm gleaning from you guys. You know, the ones that are on the internet that are putting some myths in about how we interact with the angels, but especially some of the beginning teachings out of creation, some of what Ian Clayton's been teaching on the spirits coming from the Father, how the angels are part of that.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting.
Yeah, good. Excellent. Yeah, good. Okay. You got anything, Kristen? Go on then.
I'm glad I can bring some humor into your life, Mike.
Yeah, you always do.
Okay. Mantles. Would you unpack mantles, and what are the different names of the ones like oracles? Isn't it legislator? Those. Would you run those over for me again, please?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Obviously, mantles are symbolic of robes of authority. So cloaks of authority, obviously Elijah and Elisha mantle. And I think, interestingly, that's whenever a precedent is set like that, when a mantle, Elijah goes back into the realm of heaven, he's lifted up, and then a mantle falls, and it can be picked up. I mean, interestingly, it gave a double portion, which was cool, in terms of the double portion of authority that was released. And also, when Jesus was taken back up into the realm of heaven, of course, he also would have left the mantle for us to follow, pick up. And I don't think the early church really fully appreciated the level of authority that mantle gave. So there are mantles for anything. So you have a mantle for your own personal life. You'd have a mantle of authority for the ecclesia. You'd have a mantle of authority for the regional bench. You know, there will be different mantles that would authorize you to have authority in different situations and circumstances. The heavenly governmental mantles would be the 5 that are recognized in the heavenly expression of what the 5 earthly fold ministries are, would be king, priest, oracle, legislator, and scribe. Yeah, so there's 5 there. You'd also have mantles for chancellor, magistrate, judge, as well as probably lots of other governmental positions. So lord, king, son, they'd all carry a mantle of governmental authority. And one of the chancellor's houses is the House of Mantles, and there are literally mantles for everything in this realm, plus interdimensional mantles for the age to come. I mean, it's there's quite a lot of things there, and angels in this season seem to be assigned to release mantles and bring mantles for positions of government, and both heavenly and earthly. I think that the key in the sense of earthly government is realizing that it has to have a heavenly expression first before it gets outworked on the earth. But that's sort of a process we're in, learning to understand it and engage it. But I've seen, just new mantles. I can remember sort of personally receiving some mantles. One of them was like Joseph's coat of many colors. I remember being given a coat, a mantle that looked like that. Also, I remember having this mantle that looked like some sort of charged electricity thing. It was just like an amazing thing that I was given at one stage, and it was a seasonal thing. It was something I was given for a particular season, and then that season ended, and I no longer had the mantle. So, yeah, I think the key is knowing what the position of government is that it refers to, and then functioning in it. Having a mantle and not functioning is, not much use really. So it's like, what is it we're going to do with the authority that we've been given? And so, particularly those heavenly governmental positions, learning to legislate from that, accessing different courts that we need to, and the different assemblies of God that we need to, because we have authorization to do it. Yeah. But I do believe that some of the men in white linen are wanting to pass their mantles, because some died with them. Part of the problem is not many people passed on a mantle that they carried from an earthly perspective, so that someone else on earth could continue with it. And there was this whole thing of one generation not passing on to the next. But where you did see it, you saw some pretty amazing things. I mean, one of the ones was, I think, George Jeffreys, who was an English guy who operated in evangelistic sort of signs and wonders and miracles. Reinhard Bonnke was in England and felt led to go and visit him, and he went and visited him, and he passed his mantle to him, and the next day died. And he was like old, very old, and Reinhard Bonnke has sort of picked up that and had a much wider expression of that authority. I mean, you have things like Benny Hinn lying on Catherine Coleman's grave and carrying something of that authority. So there are illustrations of it or examples of it, but most of the time it hasn't really taken place. And I think those that went back into the realms of heaven, having not passed their mantles, some of them want to. So they're looking for people who are willing to embrace that because their destiny aligns with it. I mean, I think this is the key. I can't just pick up someone's mantle because I think it would be a good idea. I need it to be part of my destiny, that mantle will enable me to outwork in that dimension. And I think we've got to be expectant to see some of those things take place, and an increase come as a result of it. So yeah, that would be my sort of take on mantles. Have you got a particular reason for asking, or is there something you're...
Well, I find sometimes that I'm not recognizing them.
Yeah.
You know, because, you know, in our mind's eye, we get some idea of what they are. And so just your testimony of the different kinds that you have experienced will help me to, you know, sometimes I think I'm functioning something, but I don't have the name, or I don't have, you know, the personal connection of what it is and what it's doing and the purposes of it. And I'd like to be more clear.
Yeah, 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 sure. And I think there are definitely heavenly purposes where that mantle gives you authority to operate in the heavenly realms, and most of what you do with that mantle will be heavenly. And then there are mantles which gives you authority to operate in both realms, so that you can be a gateway for that all heavenly authority to outwork on the earth. And I think there are earthly mantles. You know, there are earthly governmental authorities that enable us to operate on the earth with that authority. I mean, it all comes out of heaven. I mean, every mantle has to be released out of heaven. But they have different functions and different purposes, and they do. You know, some of the things I had do look different. You know, the mantle I generally wear is a sort of a bluey purple looking thing. That was the first mantle I was given, and I really like it. So I got a picture of it, sort of thing, and it's like I used it and that. But there have, you know, been other things that, in a sense, I haven't specifically really focused on the mantle, but I have been given another symbol that carries with it the fact that a mantle comes with it, and a crown. You know, so
A what?
You know, a mantle and a crown. Yeah.
And a crown. What's that?
Crown, yeah.
Oh, a crown.
A crown.
There's a little bit of
crown, yeah.
reverb going on. A crown.
So yeah, so
your voice is a little graveled.
Oh right, okay. That's all the talking I've done today.
No, it's me. It's computer. It's not that.
Okay.
I can't hear you now. I can't hear you at all.
That better?
There you are.
Is that any better?
That is awesome.
Okay,
That's
yeah, well, I unplugged it and plugged it back in. If in doubt, it's always a good thing to do.
That's good.
Yeah, so I remember being given an orb, and I didn't sort of think about a mantle attached to it, but there was. You know, and I was given a seal, a Chancellor's seal, and it had with it a mantle. Although I didn't really focus on the mantle, but the mantle is the symbol of authority that you have to use it. You know, so I have a scepter, which represents my authority to rule, but it represents the mantle is that authority that the scepter uses, in a sense. So the mantle is the authority symbol that we then use. So my seal, you know, I received the seal, the mantle of authority to use that seal came with it. Otherwise, I'd have a seal and no authority to use it. So they come together, and the crown is the symbol of being in the position that you're seated with it and enthroned and invested with it, sort of thing. So, yeah, I think the main thing is obviously to know what the function is and then just engage with that function. Whether you see the mantle or really perceive it. One of the things, Jesus's mantle, you know, the train of the robe that fills the temple, you know, in Isaiah 6, that mantle, that's amazing, because when I first saw that, we were in heaven, and we were in a chariot, and we were like not flying, unfortunately, but sort of driving along. Sometimes I like flying in chariots, but this was just going along, and it went through these big gates, and we went into this place, and I was looking and seeing this train, this robe just coming out behind, and there were flashes of light that were going on in this robe, in this mantle, you know, lots of times, just like they kept flashing lights, and they were sparkling like diamonds. So I'm looking at it thinking, wow. And so I asked him, well, what is it? And he said, every one of those is when someone's destiny comes out of Satan's trophy room and gets added to my robe. So when the diamond comes out of that robe and it's out of Satan's trophy room, so it goes off every time there's a salvation, and it's sparkling, gleaming all the time, because there's like hundreds of thousands of salvations every day, and so this thing goes off several times every second, which is pretty good, you know. So that was an interesting sort of mantle type thing that Jesus had. So yeah, excellent.
Am I allowed to ask another question, or should I wait for my turn around?
Depends if anyone else wants to ask anything.
Carry on, Kristen. You're doing real well.
Yeah, go for it.
So we had mentioned in some prior hangouts, which I'm very thankful for in this particular season, the aligning of the Chancellor's houses.
Yeah.
What does that look like? How are you involved? I mean, unpack that a little bit, because you helped me to see them in that you're seeing them in patterns of 3, and doesn't the 4 make the window to the next, or the door to the next?
Yeah.
And so sometimes I'm not aware that sometimes places seem to be so flush with each other that you're not aware that you're in a different. But I'm starting to try to be aware of that. Oh, okay, this one's in this one. So can you unpack that just a little bit? I think there's a treasure in there in this particular season for me that will help.
Okay. Yeah, they operate in sets of 3, and the sets of 3 really are looking to bring an alignment with what was, what is, and what will be. So then when that comes into agreement, then you have the window opening to bring the outworking of that, which is to start the next set. And so it's like when I first started engaging this, you know, I was pretty much clueless other than having seen all the houses. Once I went into the houses, it became really difficult, because it was so overwhelming, and the experiences, I sort of, my spirit received it, my mind didn't, but as I meditated on it, the revelation came, and I would ask God quite a lot, okay, how does this work, how does this function? And he described it as the circle of the deep, and I think that has multiple meanings in terms of the houses. You have the Mazzaroth meaning in terms of the star systems and the revolving heavens and how these get aligned and things, and that system tends to be pretty much fatalistic. In other words, it revolves and it happens and that's it. But the understanding of the Chancellor's houses in that they're not fatalistic, we get to administrate them. That's our role in bringing order, bringing governmental order. And you have the thing of like the stars and our role as a star to carry light, a luminary, to bring order, because stars were all about government and bringing seasons and times. And so this is really all about the clock of heaven, or the time of heaven, and the seasons of heaven being aligned to ensure that we were in the season and benefiting from what God wanted to release. Now, the sort of what is, was, and will be are sort of an alignment of dimensions, if you like, and the first 3 that I first engaged with, and that's where I spent most of my time initially, the precepts, the statutes, and the laws. And it's like the precepts is very much the eternal nature of God, that then the statutes are how that is expressed in it's difficult to describe, because it's like the place was full of eyes, so everything was about detail and an eye for symmetry and an eye for detail and an eye for this and an eye for that, and it was just like, whoa, this is really, you know. So, but you know, then the laws were really the kingdom principles, which were the laws of everything, which operate both in time and in what will be. So those laws, we tend to think of laws as negative things. You shall not. But majority of God's laws are not negative. They're very much permissions. They're principles of understanding to help us function, to help us rule, to help us bring things into being. So once you then form the agreement between the precepts and the statutes, the laws are the manifestation of how that outworks in what we will create. So it gives us the creative authority to establish what will be. And once you've begun to align those things, and you do that by engaging governmentally. So for me, I did that within the court case with the Court of 70 and different things. A lot of it's done by declaration and by releasing that spiritual governments that you carry. Essentially, you call them into alignment. But you have to know what you're calling them into alignment for, because this whole thing is not just a one-off for everything. You get to align these things for various specific things. And you know, it's not. I mean, I am aligning them, but I'm not aligning them and that's it. They're just aligned. I can only align them in the area of government that I've been called to operate in. And so I'm specifically doing that in the court cases and various things that I've been doing for legislation, for establishing benches, seeing cities of refuge established, and all those things in the areas that I have some level of responsibility for. And you know, some of it is as simple as, you know, knowing what they're for and therefore using that to legislate, to decree, to declare, to order. So once those first three were in place, and I was able to understand some of what I was doing, not all of it, but some of it, then the ordinances began to be. Now the ordinances is like, you know, the ordnance corps in the army is where they do all the building and the troop movements and the different sorts of things in different places, and they establish bridges and they establish, you know, all sort of that type of stuff. So that really is a release of the angelic realm and the resources of heaven, which are what the ordinances are, and they are, you know, things that then get established, and then you have mantles and then weapons, and once those three is in place, then the next set then open up with scrolls. And then that takes it to a different dimension. Once the scroll house gets opened, that starts to reveal plans, purposes, destinies at a different level. You know, it goes beyond what we're currently understanding our calling is and what we're called to. And then you have the discovery house and the commissioning house. You're building on revelation that opens up, you know, and then you start, once you understand the scroll that goes beyond this present time-space thing, then you suddenly start to discover things that do not exist in this time-space frame yet, but we will be responsible for calling them into this time frame space. So there's a lot. I mean, I'm just touching it in the sense, in the bits that I am, and I'm not really up to that point yet where I'm administrating beyond the weapons house and the preparation of the scrolls. But I've been in them all, and they are quite, you know, challenging in some senses to understand things you've never seen before, and to be able to describe things you've never seen before. But as we grow in legislation, as we learn to engage in eternity and begin to carry the precepts and the statutes and the laws of God, then we then carry the government and the seasons, and knowing the times and seasons to be able to bring alignment. And we're in a major shift of seasons, so this is a really important time to legislate those things. And we're going to come into, I think, I can't remember whether I said last week, these 4 cycles that are coming, in judgment, justice, grace, and mercy, and the cycles within those cycles. That's all part of these things being in alignment that enables us to creatively align those cycles. So when we need judgment, we can administrate judgment. When we need justice, we can administrate justice. When we need grace, we can administrate it. And when we need mercy, we can administrate it, because these things are in alignment that enables us to do so. Because all those things are ordinances. Judgment, justice, grace, and mercy are ordinances that, because the other 3 things are in place, we are now able to put those things in place. And that practically we can then begin to see outworked on the earth. And we're seeing that. Judgment has been passed. The old order ended in August. Then justice, the season of justice, or the cycle of justice, will come about next year, when that full picture of judgment has been finalized, and then we can begin to move into the different cycles that come. And some of these things are days, some of them are weeks, some of them months, some of them are years. And so there's a yearly cycle, but everything revolves around. So in an alignment of the circle of deep, these things are revolving, sort of like cogs, if you like, but they're dimensional cogs. So they're 3-dimensional cogs and 4-dimensional cogs that bring these things into alignment. That's as much as I can how I can sort of describe how it sort of works.
Well, interesting is that's how, when I stepped into and discovered the House of Discovery, it moved in the same pattern that you just described.
Yeah.
It moved like you see a pattern of an atom, and it was always moving, yet you felt, I felt upright in it, but I was totally aware that it was moving all the time.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, and they're all moving, in a sense. They're all moving in alignment with the other 2 in that set. So that's always looking to come into alignment. Now, when you look at it from the pictures of, like, the order of the Metatron's cube, that has some of the geometry attached to it, and that I've certainly found that geometry is part of this, and understanding that geometry. I'm not sure whether I mean, you've seen some of the pictures of those. I mean, I have got some pictures somewhere, but I don't know where they are. But those cycles and those geometry are included in that. So let me see if I can do that. Yeah, there. So you see some of those pictures. That's what people see when they begin to see these patterns of government, and the actual sort of dimensional picture of that is something like that. There's a cube, and there are different shapes that come out of that cube, and you can look at it from different perspectives and begin to get aspects of governmental understanding towards it. And so, I mean, some of them, there are different pictures of different. So these are spheres of government that are intersections, and what you find is, in this revolving of this, those 3s and 4s come together to create something coming out of that would have a point, and it'd be like a pyramid coming out as 3 and 4 are aligned, and each of those, then eventually, when you come back to the end and the beginning meeting, you find that precepts and precepts meet. I am working on trying to create some sort of diagrams that will help explain it when I get to teach it, or when I get to release it, which I'm sort of working on sometimes when I've got time. But it is all part of the sapphire cube, the coming out of the throne of God, and the governmental aspects of heaven and the dimensions. And it's quite complicated. I know some others of I know Henry, for instance. He had some pictures and diagrams that he developed, that God showed him, that were of that nature. That it was this intersection of dimensions and governmental spheres and the connections where those intersect. So whenever you've got two intersecting, you have agreement, which creates government, but 3 is a greater dimension of that, and 4 is an opening for that government to be released. And so in Metatron's cube, and there's a good YouTube video somewhere which shows how it's formed and how the things come together, which is quite interesting when you view it, because it shows a sort of a dimensional shift to it. Because when you look into it, it can see, well, there's a cube, and then you look deeper and you can see the Star of David, and then you can see other sort of structures within the whole thing, and they all intersect. Each of those lines, when they intersect, is a position of government. And so some of these things would be, the oracles and legislators and scribes and chancellors intersecting in government. Some of them would be, what was, what is, what will be, intersecting, and these 12 principles intersecting. But it's way beyond just that, and I can't, having not been in it enough to really understand it, I can't sort of describe it very much, other than you have some of the other pictures of it are very much more sort of picturing this one. There is an interesting one where you see all the spheres creating many different connections of government and governmental spheres within dimensions, and you can look into it and look into it and look into it and see different shapes, different connections, but they all are connecting and working together.
When you show me those pictures, I go, oh, because several months ago, the Lord took me into the Eiffel Tower.
All right, yeah.
And I'd never been there, and He showed me the Eiffel Tower, and the next, I went, I think I was in the Eiffel Tower, and then, I felt like Richard Dreyfuss in that movie Close Encounters, where he was obsessed with that monolith, and I was like obsessed. Yeah. And then finally I said, God, show me a picture of the Eiffel Tower from heaven's perspective. And when I looked down, and it looked like those pictures, all those patterns and everything else. But I was possessed with it, and people are going, you are just weird, But that was the outward. So I'm very hands-on, and it helps with, the Lord gives me more of the physical, tangible touch. I'm in it versus seeing it mathematically or something, but they still equal to the same thing.
Oh, absolutely so. Yeah, I agree. And I find exactly the same thing. My spirit just gets drawn to what, and you see it everywhere. Like the Close Encounters thing. He saw the mountain in mashed potato, and he saw, all sorts of stuff. But that happens. Your spirit just tunes into something, and everything seems to just point towards it in some way. And it's like that. When you get some revelation in the Word of God, a truth, you read everything different. It's like, wow, I never saw that like that before, and I never saw that, and I never saw, and you see it in everything, and it is like that, because something it's the deep calling to deep, that's what it is. It's the sound, because in the Close Encounters of the Third, you had the sound, the 5-note sounds, you had that
and the
sound.
color.
You had the colors that went with it. You had
the
image
position
of
that
the
they were
picture of the
playing.
mountain, where the place was. All that stuff. These things are prophetic of things like that. So yeah, absolutely, it was. I feel like that as well sometimes, and yeah, people have the same reaction to me. So I just keep it to myself generally now until I'm ready to share it with some understanding. Because people look at me and I can see their glazed look, and they're looking, and I think, oh, I'm just going to leave this. No point going any further. I do that with R12 a lot. It's like, no, I'll leave that one for now. You know, but it's good. You know, it's part of our journey of discovery, really. You know, but you know, I'm just, you know, just scratching the surface of this. You know, I've been invited to go beyond into some of these things, which I will do. You know, and engage in them. You know, and I've been, there's something beyond what our present understanding is, and it's to go beyond into something like that. It's very difficult to describe it once you're engaging in it, and it takes me quite a long time of meditating and engaging God with it for the revelation to come out in a way that I can in any shape or form describe. You know, so 12 months ago when people were pushing my buttons on this stuff, I was just waffling because I couldn't get out what my spirit knew. But 12 months later, you know, I'm not waffling quite as much, although sometimes I do. You know, but anyway, there we go.
Pretty.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You know, but these things can appear to be very esoteric and mystical and not have a practical grounding, but actually these are the governmental things that are outworked on the earth. These are the things that need to be done in the kingdom in heaven so that it can be outworked on the earth, because they have a very practical outworking. When you understand how God's precepts, statutes and laws work together, you can legislate them. You can bring them into order, into different things. When we're establishing cities of refuge, we're going to need to be able to legislate governmentally, and understanding it then will have very, very practical outworkings. Although for right now, I can see a lot of people will be thinking, don't really get what that will do, but they are experiencing it even though they don't know, because the whole season of judgment and justice and grace and mercy which are coming, they're all because of this. You know, I wouldn't have done what I'm doing without having engaged this and effectively bringing order and alignment of things. You know, all the stuff in terms of coming over to, you know, to the northwest and different things. This was all part of that, you know, because I was looking to see government established, and I had to do some alignment of things and in the heavens before that was possible on the earth. Now, I'm sure lots of other people were doing stuff as well. I just did my bit of it. But it did have a practical outworking and will continue to do so. Just most people aren't aware of it, but they are subject to it, because we will start to legislate, which will bring change and order and government into things that people will feel the benefit, because people will benefit by heavenly legislation, because there will be an increase of an outworking of the kingdom. And if people's experience of that kingdom is just, well, the finger of God has touched me and I've been delivered, or I've been healed, or there was this miracle of, then that's great. And that will be some people's experience, an introduction into it. They will have, wow, the kingdom has come and it's at hand around me and things are changing. But that change is a result of things that have already been aligned in the heavens so that change can take place. Or people can come into the revelation of that and experience of it in a much more easy way. You know.
What a snapshot of that might be. Jesus is praying, you know, in private, and then he went out and worked it out on the streets the next day. Chose his disciples, with the Father. That snapshot of what you just described about doing it in the heavenlies, then it works out on the earth.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good example. Jesus went up into the mountain to pray, to engage, and then released what he received from the Father into the earth. Yeah, and in a sense, he did that every single day by going to see what the Father was doing, and only outworking what he saw the Father doing, or saying what he heard the Father saying. So that's how he did everything, you know. And we just usually just see the result. We don't see what went before to enable that result to be produced. And now we're being called into positions of maturity to begin to participate in that and have a role to play in that, which was God's intention from the beginning, that we as his sons will be co-heirs with the kingdom. And if you think of the kingdom being a whole host of governmental things going on, and we're co-heirs with it, then we have a responsibility as co-heirs of that kingdom to administrate it in accordance with the positions that we're given to do it from. Which is why we need to find our positions of authority in the heavens, and then learn how to administrate that for my own life, and then for the ecclesia that I'm responsible for, then for the area, and then for my region, and then whatever sphere that I'm being called to operate it in individually. Then some people will have different spheres, and that's okay. But I do believe that all of us are called to govern the house and have charge of the courts, and to have access to stand in the assemblies of God. I don't believe that is just for special people. We're all special. We've all been given position. Now, what we do in those positions may well be different, but we will all carry that level of government because God really wants us to be involved. He wants us to be in those positions of authority and to understand how I should frame my life. If I can't frame my life, I'm never going to frame a planet or a solar system or a galaxy or whatever else. So this is learning for what will be in the future. We probably, it's interesting because eternity. When we think of eternity, we think of it maybe not linearly, but I don't believe that we will be without time in some form. I don't believe that. Otherwise, how can there be no end to the increase of his government? Because an increase means there must be a function where it increases. To increase, there must be some sort of time sense where it isn't like that now, and it will become something different. So although we're not going to operate within the present time frame where when sin's done away with, and that time frame is done away with, I still believe, because heaven operates in a function of time, which is different from eternity, and I believe that realm, because God is going to come and dwell with man, and that overlapping of the heavenly created realm and the earthly created realm, without time as being created to deal with sin, I still believe there will be some sort of time function, albeit different. Otherwise I can't see how Scripture can be fulfilled if everything is just now. Because we wouldn't be able to learn or to grow. It would all be now. And I can understand that from an eternal perspective. For being in eternity, quite often it feels so different from being in the realm of heaven or being in the realm of earth. It feels completely different because there is my spirit just knows what it's always known. But when I step back into this realm, I can only release within the time frame of how it should be released. So although I carry an eternal sense, I can only release it into time in order. Whereas, so who knows, who knows what it's going to be. But I do believe it's still about bringing that order and bringing that government into existence, even if it's within a totally different dimensional frame, or even if it's within, you know, a space. You know, I don't know what will we be administrating in what we call the age to come. You know, if there's an increase and there's a never-ending increase, then there's going to be more than what exists now. It is expanding. You know, I mean, I have been in the end at the edge of the galaxy, and I have released something out of my eternal spirit, and it has brought something into existence. I've also been out there and released things that have begun to shape and change the shape of things that are now in existence. You know, now if you know, no one can see that because it's beyond the scope of our natural implements or technology to engage it, but it exists, and other people are doing something similarly. What will we do in that age? You know, if we're called to birth a galaxy, will we be responsible for it as the star of that galaxy, and what will that be like? And will there be things that are created on that, and will we be responsible to create them? You know, some of these things are, you know, it starts to expand your consciousness and think, wow, there's way more than we can, but we're made in the image of God, and we're a co-heir. So if Jesus did that, and we're a co-heir, and we're a son, then why would we not expect that we would do some similar things than he did? I don't know what exactly that will be like, but having been in that discovery house and some of the mysteries that are hidden in darkness that need to come into the light, there's a whole lot more, you know. Even in this dimension, there's a whole lot more of different things that are going to be revealed that are beyond technology. Most of what we've done is to try and recreate what God and what they could do in the early, you know, ancient days, using technology rather than power of the mind and the conscious thought. There are things which will bring those things together in what we would call organic technology, which are different from, you know, physical, just inorganic, making things out of silicone or different things. So yeah, there's a whole lot more coming. But yeah, yeah.
So, how do you know what life in heaven? What is your position in heaven?
Well, your initial position in heaven will always be as a lord on the mountain, which is your position of government. That will be, you know, your initial position, and as you're faithful to engage that and frame your life and begin to take order in your own life, then you get given positions or things to do which may be at different levels of government. So kingship operates differently from lordship, and sonship operates differently than kingship, and it comes through maturity. If you're faithful and you're willing to pursue and practice and engage, then God entrusts you with more. And I think, you know, that comes from the parable of the talent, where, you know, there was a reward for faithfulness, and it was a legislative reward of you'll rule over more, you know, and I think that's really what we start with, where we are. You know, I am who I am, carries with it a position of authority, a mountain that has the position to govern 7 mountains and others, and as I'm faithful to do that, then God will then maybe call me into a bench of 3 in this area or that area, or be involved in other legislative things. But it all starts with the basic foundation. You know, if I'm not willing to learn how to do that in my own life and take responsibility for it, then I'm not really, even though I might want to be called into a bench or do that, the level of government I can operate is not going to be very high, you know, powerful, if I'm not learning to do it in my own life. You know, because that's what I'm responsible for before anything else, my life. and aligning it with God's eternal purpose, seeking Him for an unveiling of my destiny, day by day, walking it out. And it's a daily thing. If I do it today, then what I've learned today will enable me to do it better tomorrow. And if I engage in eternity today and establish that today, then I have a different foundation to outwork tomorrow. So I'm continually in my own life looking to engage in God's eternal perspective, bring the governmental order of the four faces of God into it, outwork it, then for the future that I've created, because I frame it, I call it into existence, I live it out, then should match the end and the beginning. It doesn't always, so I get to have a new day tomorrow in which to do the same thing. So I continually walk that pathway of the ancient path to then go back into what was, from the eternal perspective of what was, stand in what is, and begin to create what will be, because I have the creative potential within me as an eternal being to bring governmental order and creativity to bear. No one's just taught us how to do it, you know, and even now most of us are just learning on the job, on the fly, if you like, as we go. You know, we didn't attend, you know, a university that taught us how to do it and then we went and did it. We're learning as we go, and it's very much on the job training, which is exactly what Jesus did with his disciples. You know, he took them out, did some stuff, they saw what he did, and then he sent them out to do it. You know, when they felt probably very ill-equipped to do it. You know, but he sent the Holy Spirit with them, and he anointed them and empowered them, and they went carrying his power, his authority, and they did the things that he did, and they found that the things that were subject to the same authority that Jesus carried. You know, and he does the same with us now in a different way, in a different dimension. But it starts with, you are a mountain, you have a mandated position of authority. As you exercise that level of authority will take you into different realms. So, you know, governing the house, charge of the courts, and engaging the assemblies of God. But, you know, I always encourage people, start at the beginning and learn in that environment, because it's so much easier to learn in your own life environment. You know, you don't want to be responsible for a city of refuge when you're not responsible for your own life. It never work. You know, so, but it will come. You know, the more we practice, the more we're faithful, the more it's a lifestyle, the more we will find that we are given specific governmental tasks to do, and as we're faithful with them, he'll give us more. You know, sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming, and it was just like, whoa, you know, how do I sort of connect all these things? But they will get connected, and when they do, they will make that sense, because, you know, my life operates according to that cube as well. You know, I have spheres of government within me, my gateways and everything aligning together to release a flow. You know, it's all basically on the same patterns that operate within us, as well as that we operate within them, because there are wheels within wheels within wheels, that how this thing works. You know, it's a fractal image. Everything operates as a fractal of a bigger picture, but when you look at it, it's the same picture, but just at a different scale that makes up the whole. So, yeah.
Just a thought. There was a story about the man who was in charge of the invention office back in 1900 suggested to close it down because there couldn't be any more inventions. There had been so much invention so far. Would that would be somewhat like canonization of the scriptures, where it's a closed book now? We're just going to study almost like history, even though it's revelatory. I know that, not doing away with the power of the scriptures, but yeah. Here we are on the cusp then of this, what we're talking about and what we're looking into is like these new inventions that have never been discovered yet.
Yeah, and I've seen some of them. You know, I've actually seen some of them in the Discovery House, and I can't describe them because there is no frame of reference for them. They don't exist yet. And I know for me, I'm not called to bring them into creative order. That's not my role. Someone else does, you know. But when they do, I'll recognize them because my spirit will say, "Yeah, that's what you saw. Those were some of the mysteries," because they will be released as people take that position and they fulfill their order. You know what God's called them to do, because they're called to creatively release those things. You know, if you look back to, say, let's 1900, and you look at everything that now exists, it's like, you know, how could someone even in 1900, you know, sort of give you a thing of you know, a tablet or, you know, a laptop or something like that. You know, even I guess they had telephones, so, you know, a mobile telephone may be something that they could have pictured, but certainly not in how we're using them. I mean, even go back into, you know, the NASA program and you know, the stuff that they were using. You know, I have more power in my watch than they had to take someone to the moon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but it's progressed, and that level of progression is going to increase, you know, and it will be like that. I mean, if you take someone from, say, 1700 and bring them in today, they would have no frame of reference even for the words that you were using.
Yeah.
You know, well, this is an iPhone, you know, and it's like, oh, it would be meaningless to them just having words without seeing it working and functioning. Even if you showed them a picture of an iPhone, would they be able to understand what an iPhone was from its picture? No, because they had no frame of reference for any of it. And that's what we're engaging in by looking into some of these things. We may have seen something, but we can't actually express it in a way that's understandable for people because we've just seen an image of it rather than actually seeing the full manifestation of what that actually is. Now, I know some of these things are power sources, they are miniaturization of things. I mean, there's things that they're, you know, in terms of organic technology, there's our DNA and the things that are encoded within our DNA and the abilities to engage with light and sound, frequency, control it, use it to move, to change things, is there. You know, that's some of the authority that they already had, but they lost that, and even that's going to be released.
Just a thought. What you're speaking today, I heard Grant Mahoney say just the other day about before God could create the earth, he had to create language, and that's what you're doing in your journey, is creating a new language, or at least a language that's understandable, or creating language for us to go on and create new things. Something like that.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, everything was energy. I mean, some people, I mean, say, you know, Einstein and others, they will actually matter doesn't really exist. It's just energy in a particular frequency that we are able to perceive. You know, it's not really solid. You know, we call it matter, but really it's just vibrating strings of frequency energy, you know, in a way. So yeah, I think some of those things will be possible because of what people are doing today, what Forerunners have done, what Ian's done, and others, of opening up this realm and releasing the people's spirits, you know, the deep calling to deep. Their spirits start to align before their mind does, and you know, a lot of people's minds is unfruitful in it as yet, but their spirit knows there's something. Their spirit just engages in it, even though our minds, and I was like that in the beginning. You know, I knew there had to be something more, and even when I actually experienced the more, I didn't really understand what I'd experienced. You know, even though I could describe the encounter, I didn't really understand the fullness of its meaning until now. I'm suddenly realizing that was that. Yeah, that's what that was about. That's what that was unveiling or bringing. And of course, it created a hunger in me for more. You know, when you taste and see something's good, you want more of it. And I think that's, if we can taste and see that this is good and encourage others to taste and see it's good, then they'll want more. You know, it's only when other people say that tastes horrible and that will poison you, don't touch it, that people are afraid to taste and see, because they think they're going to be poisoned or polluted by tasting and touching it. And that's what the old order does. It tries to warn, or in their view, protect people from deception and error by saying, don't touch and don't taste any of that stuff. Whereas, you know, we've got to go beyond that and encourage people to touch and taste and see. And then they'll for themselves know that the reality of that and the potential that that releases will unveil.
Amen.
Yeah. Awesome.
In case you hadn't met her yet, this is Viona from Seattle.
Hi.
A friend of mine.
Okay, good. Well, there's all sorts of stuff in the Northwest, which is God's doing and drawing together. So it's been great meeting with you. So anyway.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, some of it is because, you know, I've engaged with some of the things that Ian has taught, and I can express them through my own personal testimony of them. Some of it is just stuff that God showed me, you know, outside of anything Ian did. You know, my heavenly encounters came before I ever met Ian or knew he existed in that sense. But I do know that a lot of people engage with Ian. They find it difficult to understand. And so I try and break things down and make it, from my own personal experience, simplify it, but expand on it. So that, you know, Ian will teach one session, I might teach 12. Because I sort of just, hopefully, just unveil it in a way which is through my own personal experience, to help people grasp it and live it, rather than just go away thinking, wow. Because, I mean, I've been to Ian stayed with me a couple of times, you know, and I've been to his conferences, and I know people go, wow, and then they go, but how? You know, and even if you do go back and look at the things Ian taught 10 years ago, they're still not that easy to grasp for some people, you know, so you still have to try and break them down and make it simplified so that people can grasp it and then embrace it and then live in the principles. Because essentially all that Ian's teaching is just the stuff that God gave him. You know, it's just revelation. Other people have received similar revelation but present it in different ways. You know, the court teaching, you have people like Robert Henderson and others who had parallel revelation. So, you know, and some of the stuff I'm doing, you know, there's parallel revelation, you know, but it all lines up. It's just presented in slightly different ways or different expressions of the same thing, so that some people will get it one way, some people will get it another way, and some people will receive it another way. You know, what I'm convinced is you have to put it into practice. You know, it isn't just magic, and it won't just happen by having some whacked out experience. Although, you know, experiences are great, but we have to voluntarily do this by choice and through engagement, rather than, okay, I'm going to go into a trance every day and something might happen. Trances are great, but I have to take responsibility. I think some of those things are the initial stages of getting us into the experience that we can then, by choice, act in. It's like, I think trances are sort of pretty immature things, because they're just stuff that God has to suspend everything to get our attention and to unveil something. Once you've matured, you can step in to engage that all the time. you know, and you don't need a trance to be able to step in and engage in your spirit in heaven. You just do it because you can now activate that because you've learned how to do it. You know, God introduced us into these things in a way to get our attention, and now he's wanting us to take responsibility for outworking that. But it's fun, you know. It's all fun learning anyway. So great. Okay, excellent. Okay, well, we'll leave it there.